Everyone believed Duke Alistair Ravenscroft was untouchable. He had survived war, outlived rivals, and ruled his estate with absolute authority. Enemies feared him, nobles bowed to him, and the one man he trusted beyond question was his own blood brother. That trust would nearly cost him his life. On a quiet night inside Ravenscroft Manor, the Duke's fate was already sealed. The guards were reassigned. The wine was poisoned. The witnesses were bought. By morning, the most powerful Duke in the county would be dead, and his brother would inherit everything. An accident, they would call it. The only problem was a maid. Eliza Moore was invisible by design. She cleaned after midnight, spoke only when spoken to, and passed through the halls without leaving a trace. But while cleaning the Duke's study, she overheard a conversation that froze her blood. The Duke's own brother was planning his murder. If she spoke, she would be silenced. If she stayed quiet, a man would die. And when the Duke raised the poisoned glass to his lips, "If this story is already pulling you in, please like and subscribe. Stay with us. What happens next will truly change everything." Duke Alistair Ravenscroft did not believe in mercy. He believed in discipline, in honor, in the unbreakable bond of blood. These were the pillars that had built his empire, the iron laws that governed Ravenscroft Manor, Umar, and the principles that had kept him alive through wars that turned lesser men into corpses. At 32, the Duke had already buried more enemies than most men would meet in a lifetime. He had inherited his title at 16 after his father's sudden death, and within 5 years he had doubled the estate's wealth, crushed 3 rival houses, and earned a reputation so fearsome that nobles whispered his name with reverence and dread. But if you asked him what he valued most, he would not say power. He would say loyalty. And the man he trusted above all others was his younger brother, Lord Edmund Ravenscroft. Edmund was everything Alistair was not. Where the Duke was cold and calculated, Edmund was warm and charming. Where Alistair commanded through fear, Edmund won hearts through smiles. The nobles adored him. The servants spoke fondly of his kindness. Even the children in the village would run to greet him when he passed. Alistair had always admired that about his brother. Edmund made people feel seen. He made them feel valued. It was a gift Alistair had never possessed, and one he had long since stopped trying to learn. You don't need to be loved, their father had told him once. You need to be obeyed. Alistair had obeyed that lesson perfectly. But Edmund was different. He could walk into a room full of enemies and leave with allies. He could turn tension into laughter with a single joke. He was the bridge between the Duke's iron rule and the people's fragile hearts. That was why Alistair trusted him with everything. Edmund managed the estate finances. He oversaw diplomatic relations. He handled disputes that required a softer touch. And when Alistair needed counsel, it was always Edmund he turned to first, because blood was everything. Their father had drilled that into them both. Blood did not betray. Blood did not lie. Blood protected blood, no matter the cost. Alistair had built his entire life on that belief. Tonight, in the grand dining hall of Ravenscroft Manor, that belief still held strong. The fire crackled in the hearth, casting long shadows across the stone walls. Alistair sat at the head of the table, his posture perfect, his expression unreadable. He had just returned from a month-long campaign in the Northern Territories, and his body still carried the weight of battle. Bruises hidden beneath fine clothing, exhaustion masked by discipline. Edmund sat across from him, relaxed and smiling, a goblet of wine in his hand. "You look tired, brother," Edmund said, his voice smooth and concerned. "You push yourself too hard." "Someone has to," Alistair replied, his tone clipped but not unkind. "The North is secured, but it cost us. We lost good men." Edmund's smile faded slightly, replaced by something that looked like genuine sadness. "I'm sorry. I know how much you value your soldiers." Alistair nodded. He did value them. Every name, every face, every letter he had written to their families. That was the burden of leadership, carrying the weight of every life lost under your command. "How are things here?" Alistair asked, changing the subject. "Any trouble while I was gone?" "None at all," Edmund said smoothly. "The estate runs like clockwork. The harvest was excellent. The tenants are content. You've built something truly remarkable, Alistair." There was pride in Edmund's voice, but there was something else too, something Alistair couldn't quite name. If he had been paying closer attention, he might have noticed the way Edmund's fingers tightened around the goblet. He might have seen the flicker of something dark behind his brother's easy smile. He might have heard the hollow ring beneath the compliment. But Alistair was tired, battle-worn, and he trusted his brother completely. "I couldn't have done it without you," Alistair said simply. "You've been my foundation, Edmund. I don't say it often enough, but I'm grateful." Edmund's smile widened, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's what brothers are for," he said softly. The servants moved silently through the hall, refilling wine, clearing plates, invisible as ghosts. Alistair barely noticed them. He never did. They were part of the background, necessary but unremarkable. One of them, a young woman with dark hair and careful movements, paused near the doorway, her eyes flicking briefly toward the brothers before she disappeared into the shadows. Alistair didn't see her. He never did. "I've arranged a private supper for us tomorrow night," Edmund said casually, swirling his wine. "Just the two of us. I thought we could celebrate your return. Properly. No council, no servants. Just brothers." Alistair raised an eyebrow. "That's unusually sentimental of you." Edmund laughed, but there was an edge to it. "Can't a man appreciate his brother without suspicion?" "Of course," Alistair said, and he meant it. "Tomorrow night, then." Edmund raised his goblet. "To brotherhood." Alistair lifted his own glass. "To loyalty." They drank. And as the fire burned low and the shadows grew longer, neither man knew that tomorrow's supper would never happen, because by tomorrow night, one of them would be dead, and the other would be revealed as a traitor. But the Duke who believed in blood would never see it coming, not until it was almost too late. Eliza Moore had learned to be invisible. It was not a skill she was born with. It was a lesson carved into her through years of survival, taught by cold kitchens, cruel words, and the understanding that in a world built for the powerful, the safest place for a servant was nowhere at all. She was 23 years old, though most people would have guessed younger. Her face was plain by noble standards. No painted lips, no powdered skin, no elaborate hairstyles that required hours and handmaidens. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple braid. Her dress was gray wool, practical and unremarkable. Her hands were rough from work, her posture trained to be small. Everything about her was designed to disappear, and it worked. Eliza had been a maid at Ravenscroft Manor for 6 years, and in all that time the Duke had never once looked directly at her. She had served him meals, cleaned his rooms, stood 3 feet away while he signed documents, and he had never acknowledged her existence. Not with malice, not with cruelty, simply with the same indifference one might show a chair or a candlestick. She was furniture, useful, forgettable. Most of the servants hated the Duke for it. They whispered about his coldness, his arrogance, the way he treated them like shadows. But Eliza had never hated him. How could you hate someone for not seeing what you had worked so hard to hide? Besides, she had learned long ago that invisibility was not a curse. It was armor. The other servants gossiped freely around her, forgetting she could hear. The nobles spoke openly in her presence, assuming she was too stupid or too scared to understand. Even Lord Edmund, charming and warm to everyone else, barely spared her a glance when she refilled his wine. They all forgot she was there, and in forgetting, they revealed everything. Eliza had grown up in a small village on the edge of the Ravenscroft estate. Her father had been a healer, Not a physician, nothing so grand, but a man who knew herbs and remedies passed down through generations. He had taught her to read, to think, to observe the world with careful eyes. "People don't listen with their ears, Eliza," he used to say. "They listen with their assumptions, and if they assume you're not worth hearing, they'll tell you everything." Her father was dead now. Fever had taken him when she was 17, and with no family left, she had come to the manor looking for work. The head housekeeper had taken one look at her, quiet, plain, unremarkable, and hired her on the spot. Invisible girls made the best servants. For 6 years, Eliza had kept her head down and her mouth shut. She had watched. She had listened. She had learned the rhythms of the manor, the personalities of the nobles, the secrets hidden behind closed doors. And she had learned one terrible truth. Silence could save you, but it could also damn you. 3 years ago, she had overheard 2 guards planning to steal from the Duke's treasury. She had said nothing, too afraid to speak, too certain she would be blamed. The theft had happened. The guards had vanished, and an innocent stable boy had been executed in their place. Eliza still saw his face in her nightmares. She had sworn then that if she ever heard something that mattered, something that could save an innocent life, she would not stay silent again, no matter the cost. Tonight, as she moved through the darkened corridors of Ravenscroft Manor with a bucket and cloth, that promise felt like a weight in her chest. It was well past midnight. Most of the servants were asleep. The nobles had retired hours ago. The manor was silent, except for the soft crackle of dying fires and the whisper of her footsteps on stone. She had been assigned to clean the Duke's study, a task reserved for the most trusted servants. It was a rare honor, though Eliza suspected it was less about trust and more about the fact that she never stole, never broke anything, and never spoke unless spoken to. The study was on the 3rd floor, tucked away in the east wing. It was a cold room, all dark wood and leather, filled with maps and documents and the smell of old paper. Eliza had cleaned it a dozen times before. She knew exactly how long it would take, exactly where everything belonged, exactly how to move through the space without disturbing anything. She pushed open the heavy door and stepped inside. The fire had burned down to embers. The room was dark except for a sliver of moonlight through the tall windows. Eliza lit a candle and set to work, her movements automatic and efficient. Dust the shelves, wipe the desk, straighten the maps, empty the ash from the fireplace. She was halfway through when she heard it. Voices, muffled, urgent, coming from the small adjoining chamber, the Duke's private meeting room. Eliza froze, her cloth still in hand. The door to the meeting room was slightly ajar, just enough for sound to slip through. She should leave. She knew that. Good servants didn't eavesdrop. Good servants didn't ask questions. But something in those voices made her pause. One of them was Lord Edmund, and he sounded nothing like the charming, gentle man who smiled at everyone. He sounded cold, calculating, angry. Eliza took a single, silent step toward the door, and then she heard the words that would change everything. "By tomorrow night, my brother will be dead." Her blood turned to ice, "and I will finally have everything that should have been mine from the beginning." Eliza's hand flew to her mouth to stifle a gasp. She pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so loudly she was certain they would hear it. She shouldn't be here. She shouldn't be hearing this. But she couldn't move, because Lord Edmund Ravenscroft, the Duke's beloved brother, the man everyone trusted, was planning murder. And Eliza Moore, the invisible maid, was the only one who knew. Eliza couldn't breathe. Her back was pressed against the cold stone wall, her hand still clamped over her mouth, her entire body rigid with terror. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to flee back down the corridors and pretend she had never been here, never heard anything, never existed at all. But her feet wouldn't move, because Lord Edmund was still talking. You're certain the poison will work? Edmund's voice was low, controlled, nothing like the warm tone he used in public. This was the voice of a man who had thought through every detail, who had planned this moment with the precision of a general planning war. Absolutely certain, my lord. The second voice was unfamiliar, rougher, older, with the accent of a hired man rather than nobility. The apothecary assured me it mimics heart failure perfectly. No trace, no suspicion. The Duke returns from battle exhausted. His heart gives out in his sleep. Tragic, but not unexpected for a man who pushes himself so hard. Eliza's fingernails dug into her palms. And the timing? Edmund asked. Tomorrow night, during your private supper. I'll add it to his wine before the meal is served. He'll drink, retire to his chambers, and by morning, the man paused. Well, by morning, you'll be the new Duke of Ravenscroft. There was a long silence. Then Edmund laughed, a cold, bitter sound that made Eliza's skin crawl. Do you know how long I've waited for this? Edmund said softly. How many years I've stood in his shadow, playing the loyal brother, the trusted advisor, the second son who would never amount to anything. You've been patient, my lord. Patient. Edmund's voice rose slightly, then dropped back to a harsh whisper. I've been invisible. Our father looked at Alistair and saw the future. He looked at me and saw nothing, a spare, a backup in case the golden sun failed. And Alistair? He took everything, the title, the wealth, the respect, and he never once questioned whether he deserved it. Tomorrow you'll have your justice. It's not justice, Edmund said coldly. It's correction. I should have been Duke from the beginning. I'm smarter than him, more diplomatic, better with people. But because I was born second, I'm expected to bow and scrape and be grateful for whatever scraps he throws me. Eliza felt sick. The guards, Edmund continued, his tone businesslike now. You're certain they're positioned correctly? Yes, my lord. The night watch has been reassigned. The guards who might ask questions are stationed on the far side of the estate. The ones near the Duke's chambers are ours. They'll see nothing, hear nothing, report nothing. And the servants? The evening staff will be dismissed early. Only the kitchen boy will remain, and he's already been paid to stay silent. By the time anyone realizes something is wrong, it will be far too late. Edmund made a satisfied sound. Perfect. No witnesses, no questions. Just a tragic accident, and a grieving brother who must now shoulder the burden of leadership. You've thought of everything, my lord. I've had years to think about it, Edmund said quietly. Every time he looked through me like I didn't exist. Every time he gave orders without asking my opinion. Every time he reminded me that blood means loyalty, as if I were some faithful dog who should be grateful for his scraps. There was a rustling sound, papers being moved perhaps, or a cloak being adjusted. You'll have your payment in full once it's done, Edmund said. Gold, a new identity, and safe passage out of the county. No one will ever connect you to this. Understood, my lord. It's been a pleasure doing business with you. The pleasure will be mine, Edmund said coldly. Tomorrow night, I stop being the forgotten brother. Tomorrow night, I become Duke. Footsteps. They were moving toward the door. Eliza's heart exploded into panic. If they came through that door, if they saw her standing there, if they realized she had heard everything. She moved. Pure survival instinct took over. She dropped to her knees behind the Duke's massive desk, pressing herself into the shadows, making herself as small as possible. Her candle was still burning on the far side of the room, but there was no time to retrieve it. She held her breath. The door to the meeting room opened fully. Make sure the apothecary understands the consequences of failure, Edmund said as he stepped into the study. If Alistair survives, we all die. He won't survive, my lord. I stake my life on it. You already have. Their footsteps crossed the study. Eliza squeezed her eyes shut, pressing herself harder against the desk, praying to every god she'd ever heard of that they wouldn't notice the candle, wouldn't sense her presence, wouldn't think to check the shadows. The footsteps paused. Eliza's lungs burned. Her vision swam with spots. She couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't make a single sound. "Did you leave a candle burning?" the hired man asked. Eliza's world stopped. "One of the servants must have forgotten it," Edmund said dismissively. "It doesn't matter. No one comes to this wing at night." "Should I extinguish it?" "Leave it. We don't have time. The guards change watch in 10 minutes, and I need to be seen in the dining hall before then. Witnesses to my whereabouts are essential." "Very well, my lord." The footsteps moved again, toward the main door this time. It opened, closed. The sound echoed through the empty study. Silence. Eliza stayed frozen for another full minute, counting her heartbeats, making certain they were truly gone. Then, slowly, shakily, she rose from behind the desk. Her legs nearly gave out. She grabbed the edge of the desk for support, her mind racing, her thoughts tumbling over each other in chaos. The Duke was going to be murdered. Tomorrow night, by his own brother, by the man he trusted more than anyone in the world. And she was the only one who knew. Eliza looked at the door, the heavy oak door that led to freedom, to safety, to the simple life of being invisible and unremarkable and alive. Then she looked at the candle still burning on the table, its flame small and fragile and alone, just like her. She thought of the stable boy, the innocent boy who had died because she had stayed silent, the face that haunted her dreams. She thought of her father's words, "Silence can save you, but it can also damn you." And she thought of the Duke, cold, distant, unaware, who would drink poisoned wine tomorrow night and die believing his brother loved him. Eliza took a deep breath. Then she blew out the candle and walked into the darkness, because she had a choice to make. And this time, she would not stay silent, even if it killed her. Morning came too quickly. Eliza hadn't slept. She had spent the entire night pacing in her tiny servants' quarters, her mind churning through impossible scenarios, each one ending in disaster. She could go to the Duke directly. But servants didn't simply walk up to the Duke and demand an audience. She would be stopped by guards, dismissed by stewards, laughed at by nobles. And even if by some miracle she reached him, why would he believe her? She was nobody. A maid. Lord Edmund was his blood, his trusted brother, his closest advisor. Who would the Duke believe? The brother he had trusted his entire life, or a servant girl he had never even looked at? She could go to the guards. But Edmund had already bought them. The ones who might help were stationed too far away, and the ones nearby were in his pocket. She would be reporting a conspiracy to the very men who were part of it. She could tell the other servants. But what could they do? They were as powerless as she was, and if word reached Edmund that someone knew, if he even suspected there was a witness, he would act faster, change plans, eliminate threats, including her. Every option led to the same conclusion. She would not be believed, and speaking out would get her killed. But staying silent would get the Duke killed. As dawn broke over Ravenscroft Manor, Eliza made her decision. She would try, she would speak, and if no one listened, at least she would have tried. She would not carry another death on her conscience. Her first attempt came during the morning meal service. The senior servants gathered in the kitchen before dawn to receive their assignments from Mrs. Thornberry, the head housekeeper, a stern woman with iron-gray hair and a voice that could freeze water. Eliza approached her carefully, keeping her voice low. "Mrs. Thornberry, I need to speak with you. It's urgent." The housekeeper didn't even look up from her ledger. "Urgent matters go through proper channels, girl. If you've broken something, report it to the quartermaster." "It's not that. It's about..." Eliza hesitated, choosing her words carefully. It's about Lord Edmund. I overheard something last night. Something dangerous. That got Mrs. Thornberry's attention. Her eyes snapped up, cold and sharp. You were eavesdropping? No. I was cleaning the Duke's study like I was assigned, and I heard... Stop. Mrs. Thornberry's voice cut like a blade. I don't know what you think you heard, but gossiping about nobility is grounds for immediate dismissal. Lord Edmund is a good man, beloved by everyone in this manor. If you're spreading lies about him, I'm not lying. Enough. The housekeeper's face hardened. You will return to your duties, and you will not speak of this again. Do I make myself clear? Eliza's hands clenched at her sides. But the Duke is in danger. The Duke is surrounded by loyal guards and protected by his brother. He is in no danger whatsoever. You, however, are in danger of losing your position if you continue this nonsense. Mrs. Thornberry leaned closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. I've seen girls like you before, desperate for attention, willing to say anything to feel important. It never ends well. Please, you have to listen. I've listened quite enough. Return to your duties, now. Eliza's second attempt came an hour later. She found Thomas, one of the older guards, a man who had served the Ravenscroft family for 20 years. He was standing watch near the armory, and Eliza approached him with her heart in her throat. Thomas, I need your help. The Duke is... You shouldn't be here, lass, Thomas said, not unkindly. Servants aren't allowed in this section. I know, but this is important. Lord Edmund is planning to... Thomas's expression changed instantly. His friendly demeanor vanished, replaced by cold suspicion. Planning to what? Eliza faltered. Saying it out loud suddenly felt insane. Murder, poison, conspiracy. Who would believe such things about Lord Edmund, the beloved brother, the kind nobleman? I overheard him. Last night. He's going to hurt the Duke. Thomas stared at her for a long moment. Then he shook his head slowly. Girl, do you have any idea what you're saying? Lord Edmund loves his brother. Everyone knows that. They're closer than most blood brothers ever are. But I heard him. You heard wrong. Or you misunderstood. Or you're causing trouble for attention. His voice hardened. Lord Edmund is a good man. The Duke trusts him completely, and you're a maid who shouldn't even be in this corridor. Please, just tell someone. I'll tell someone, all right. I'll tell the captain that there's a servant spreading dangerous lies about the Duke's own brother. You'll be dismissed before noon. Eliza stepped back, her eyes stinging. You won't even consider... Get back to work before I have you removed. She tried 3 more times throughout the day. She approached a junior steward who dismissed her without listening. She cornered a kitchen worker who promised to pass along the concern and never did. She even attempted to speak with the Duke's personal secretary, who threatened to have her arrested for harassment. No one would listen. No one cared what a maid had to say. By late afternoon, Eliza was sitting in the servants' washing room, her hands shaking as she scrubbed linens she could barely see through her tears. She had failed. She had tried everything she could think of, and no one had believed her. Worse, she had drawn attention to herself. People were watching her now, whispering about the mad servant girl making accusations against Lord Edmund. If she kept pushing, she would be dismissed or arrested. Or worse, if Edmund heard that someone was making accusations, he might move up his timeline. He might act tonight instead of tomorrow. And then the Duke would die even sooner. And it would be her fault for speaking. Eliza pressed her wet hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. What was she supposed to do? She was powerless, voiceless, invisible, just like she had always been. The afternoon bells rang, signaling the approach of evening. Somewhere in the manor, preparations were being made for tomorrow's private supper. The special wine was probably already being selected. The poison was probably already prepared. and tomorrow night, the Duke would drink it. Eliza stood slowly, her jaw set, her decision made. If no one would listen to her, then she would have to act alone. She couldn't stop the conspiracy. She couldn't expose Edmund. She couldn't convince anyone that danger was coming. But she could be there tomorrow night. She could watch. And when Edmund tried to poison the Duke, she would stop it herself, even if it meant revealing herself, even if it meant facing Edmund's wrath, even if it meant dying in the Duke's place. She had tried to save him the right way. Now, she would save him the only way left, by stepping out of the shadows and into the light, no matter what it cost her. The private supper was set for 8 o'clock. Eliza spent the day in agonizing preparation. She memorized the layout of the private dining room. She studied the servant schedules and learned that only one footman would be present during the meal, a young man named Peter who had started just 3 weeks ago, new, nervous, easy to distract. She volunteered to help with the evening preparations, a task normally beneath her station but one that no one questioned. Invisible servants were useful that way. They could go anywhere, do anything, and no one noticed. By 7:30, Eliza was positioned in the servants' corridor that ran behind the private dining room. There was a narrow door there, hidden behind a tapestry used for discreet service during intimate meals. Through it, she could hear everything. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The Duke arrived first. Eliza heard his footsteps, measured, precise, the walk of a military man who had never learned to relax. She heard the scrape of a chair, the rustle of clothing as he sat. Then Edmund entered. "Brother." His voice was warm, delighted, perfectly performed. "I'm so glad we could do this. It feels like we barely spoke during your return." "I've been occupied with reports," the Duke said. His voice sounded tired. The northern campaign was more complicated than anticipated. All the more reason to take an evening for ourselves. No counsel, no advisors, just family. Family. The word felt like poison in Eliza's ears. She pressed her eye to the narrow gap in the door. Through it, she could see a sliver of the room, elegant tapestries, a polished table, 2 chairs positioned across from each other. And on the table, 2 goblets of wine. One of them was death. "I took the liberty of selecting your favorite vintage," Edmund said smoothly. "The Bordeaux from the southern estates. You always said it reminded you of father." "Thoughtful of you." Eliza watched as Edmund lifted his own goblet, swirling the wine with practiced ease. The Duke reached for his own glass, the one on the right, the one closest to him. This was it. Eliza's hand moved to the door handle. Her palms were slick with sweat. Every instinct screamed at her to wait, to be certain, to not act until she was absolutely sure. But she had seen Edmund's face last night. She had heard his voice, cold and calculating, planning his brother's death with the efficiency of a merchant planning a trade deal. She knew which glass was poisoned. The Duke lifted the goblet to his lips. Eliza burst through the door. "Your Grace, stop!" Everything happened at once. The Duke jerked back, startled. Wine sloshed over the rim of his goblet. Edmund spun toward her, his face flashing through a dozen emotions in a single second. Shock, recognition, fury, and then carefully controlled confusion. "What is the meaning of this?" the Duke demanded, his voice sharp with authority and anger. Eliza stumbled forward, her breath coming in gasps. "The wine! Don't drink the wine! It's poisoned!" Silence crashed through the room like a physical force. Edmund recovered first, his expression shifting to perfectly calibrated concern. "Poisoned? What on earth are you talking about? Who is this girl?" Eliza's voice shook. "I'm a maid, Your Grace. I work in the manor. And I overheard." "You overheard what?" The Duke set down his goblet with deliberate care, his eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel pinned like an insect. This was the first time he had ever truly looked at her. She wished it were under different circumstances. "I was cleaning your study 2 nights ago," Eliza said, the words tumbling out in a rush. "I heard voices in your private meeting room. Lord Edmund was talking to someone about killing you, tonight, with poison in the wine. He said it would look like heart failure." "That's absurd!" Edmund's voice rose with perfect indignation. "This girl is clearly delusional. Guards." "Wait." Eliza turned to the Duke, desperate. "Please, Your Grace, you have to believe me. I heard everything. The poison, the bribed guards, the plan to make it look like an accident." The door burst open. 2 guards entered, hands on their weapons. Edmund pointed at Eliza. "This servant has interrupted a private meal with wild accusations. Remove her immediately." "No." Eliza backed away from the advancing guards. "Please, just test the wine. If I'm lying, then arrest me, execute me, I don't care. But test it first." The Duke raised one hand. The guards stopped. He stared at Eliza for a long, terrible moment. She could see him weighing options, calculating probabilities, trying to determine if she was mad or if his brother, his beloved, trusted brother, could possibly be a traitor. "She's clearly unstable, Alistair," Edmund said softly. "Look at her. She's shaking, probably been stealing wine from the cellars, and has addled her mind." "I haven't stolen anything." Eliza's voice cracked. "I'm telling the truth. I know how it sounds. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I swear on my father's grave that I heard Lord Edmund planning your murder." "Enough of this," Edmund snapped. He reached for his own goblet. "If you're so certain one of these is poisoned, girl, then watch." He lifted the wine to his lips and drank deeply. Then he set down the empty goblet and spread his hands. "There, satisfied? No poison, no conspiracy. Just a paranoid servant disrupting a private dinner." Eliza's blood ran cold. He had drunk from the wrong glass. Or had he? Had she been wrong about which one was poisoned? Had she misunderstood everything? Had she just destroyed her life over a mistake? The Duke picked up his goblet again, and in that moment, Eliza saw it. The smallest flicker of triumph in Edmund's eyes. The faintest hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. He thought he had won. He thought his performance had been perfect. But Eliza had spent 6 years watching people who thought she couldn't see. "Your Grace, don't..." The Duke raised the glass. Eliza didn't think. She simply moved. She lunged forward and struck the goblet from his hand. It flew through the air, hit the edge of the table, and shattered against the stone floor. Dark red wine spread across the gray stones like blood. The Duke shot to his feet, his chair crashing backward. "How dare you?" And then he stopped, because everyone in the room had heard it. The hiss. Where the wine touched the stone, thin tendrils of smoke rose into the air. The liquid bubbled and frothed, eating into the floor with a sound like acid on metal. No wine did that. The room fell silent. The Duke looked at the spreading stain, at the smoking stone, at his brother. "Edmund," Lord Edmund's mask finally cracked. For just a moment, pure hatred flashed across his face, directed not at Eliza, but at his brother. Years of resentment, jealousy, and rage compressed into a single look. Then he ran. Edmund bolted for the door, shoving past the guards with surprising strength. One of them lunged for him, but Edmund was faster, disappearing into the corridor beyond. "After him," the Duke commanded. But even as the guards pursued, even as shouts echoed through the manor, Eliza saw something else. The Duke swayed. His hand went to his throat. His face paled. "Your Grace?" Eliza stepped toward him. "What's wrong?" The Duke's voice was hoarse. "I drank from it, earlier, before you arrived. Just a sip to test the vintage." He collapsed. Eliza caught him before he hit the floor, her arms barely strong enough to support his weight. The guards were gone. The room was empty. It was just her and the Duke, and he was dying. "Stay with me," Eliza whispered fiercely. "Stay with me, Your Grace. I didn't save you just to watch you die now." His eyes found hers, The first time he had truly seen her, and perhaps the last. "Who are you?" "Someone who refuses to stay silent," Eliza said. And then she dragged the Duke toward the hidden passages she had memorized years ago, because saving his life wasn't over yet. It had only just begun. The hidden passages of Ravenscroft Manor were not meant for comfort. They were narrow, cold, and dark, built centuries ago for servants to move through the estate unseen, or for nobles to escape during sieges. Most people had forgotten they existed, but Eliza had explored every corridor, every turn, every secret door during her 6 years of invisible servitude. Now, those forgotten paths were the only thing keeping the Duke alive. She half dragged, half carried him through the darkness, his weight threatening to pull them both down with every step. He was a tall man, solid with muscle from years of military training, and Eliza was slight. Her arms screamed in protest, her legs trembled. But she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. "Where are you taking me?" The Duke's voice was weak, slurred. The poison was working fast. "Somewhere safe," Eliza gasped. "The old infirmary, East Wing. No one uses it anymore." "Can't trust anyone." "You can trust me." "Why?" He stumbled, and she caught him, bracing his weight against the wall. "Why would you risk everything?" "Because staying silent gets people killed," Eliza said fiercely. "And I'm done staying silent." They emerged from the passage into a long abandoned section of the manor. The old infirmary had been built during the plague years, a place to quarantine the sick away from the main estate. After the plague passed, it had been sealed off, too full of bad memories to repurpose. It was perfect. Eliza kicked open the weathered door and pulled the Duke inside. Dust hung thick in the air. Moonlight streamed through broken shutters, illuminating rows of empty cots and rusted medical equipment. It smelled of decay and forgotten death, but it had water, bandages, and most importantly, herbs. The manor's old healer had kept a storeroom here, and when he died, no one had bothered to clear it out. Eliza had discovered it 2 years ago while exploring. She had recognized many of the dried plants from her father's teachings. She lowered the Duke onto one of the sturdier cots. His skin was gray, sweat beading on his forehead. His breathing came in shallow, labored gasps. "Don't close your eyes," Eliza commanded, her voice sharper than she'd ever used with nobility. "Look at me. Stay awake." "Poison," he managed. "What kind?" "I don't know exactly." Eliza's hands moved with practiced efficiency, lighting a small oil lamp she'd stashed here, pulling out jars of dried herbs. "But I heard them say it would mimic heart failure. That means it's probably something that slows the heart, constricts breathing, causes organ shutdown." "How do you—" He coughed violently. "How do you know this?" "My father was a healer." Eliza's hands didn't stop moving as she spoke, crushing dried leaves with a mortar and pestle. "He taught me everything he knew before he died. I'm not a physician, but I know enough." "Enough to save me?" Eliza met his eyes. "I'm going to try." She worked quickly, her father's voice echoing in her memory. "For poisons that slow the heart, stimulate circulation. For constricted breathing, open the airways. For organ shutdown, flush the blood." She made a tea from dried hawthorn berries to strengthen the heart, added crushed ginger root to stimulate circulation, mixed in activated charcoal from the old medicine stores to absorb toxins in the stomach, then a tincture of milk thistle to protect the liver from damage. "Drink this." She lifted his head, pressing the bitter brew to his lips. "All of it. I know it tastes terrible, but you have to drink." He obeyed without question. The first time in his life he had ever taken orders from a servant. The first time he had ever trusted someone he couldn't command. Then came the hard part. "I need to make you vomit," Eliza said bluntly, Whatever poison you swallowed is still in your stomach. The longer it stays there, the more your body absorbs. We need to get it out." The Duke nodded weakly. Eliza prepared a second mixture, ipecac root and salt water. Her father had used it countless times to purge poison from the body. It was violent, painful, and necessary. She forced it down his throat, then held a bucket as his body convulsed, rejecting everything in his stomach. He retched again and again, his entire frame shaking with the effort. Through it all, Eliza stayed beside him, one hand on his back, steadying him, supporting him. When it was finally over, he collapsed back onto the cot, trembling and pale but breathing more easily. "Better?" Eliza asked softly. "Awful," he rasped. "But better." She smiled slightly. "The worst is over. Now we wait." She spent the next hour monitoring him, checking his pulse, watching his breathing, applying cool cloths to his forehead when fever spiked. She gave him water mixed with honey and salt to restore what he'd lost. She made him talk to her, to stay conscious, to fight through the poison still coursing through his veins. And slowly, impossibly, he stabilized. By the time the first hint of dawn touched the broken shutters, the Duke was sleeping, not the unconsciousness of poison, but the deep healing sleep of a body recovering from trauma. Eliza sat beside the cot, exhausted beyond measure, her hands still trembling from hours of work. She had done it. She had saved him. When the Duke woke several hours later, the first thing he saw was Eliza, still sitting beside him, her head drooped forward in exhaustion, but her hand still resting near his wrist, ready to check his pulse if he stirred. "You're still here," he said quietly. She jerked awake, immediately alert. "Your Grace, how do you feel?" "Like I was kicked by a horse." He tried to sit up, groaned, and settled back down. "But alive, thanks to you." "Don't thank me yet," Eliza said, her tone pragmatic. "You're alive, but we're not safe. Edmund will be searching for both of us, if he finds us before you're strong enough to fight back." "He'll finish what he started," the Duke completed grimly. He studied her in the gray morning light, truly studied her for the first time. "What's your name?" "Eliza Moore, Your Grace." "How long have you worked in my manor, Eliza Moore?" 6 years. Something flickered across his face. 6 years, and I never once noticed you." "I worked very hard to not be noticed." "Why?" "Because being invisible keeps you safe," Eliza said simply. "Or it used to." The Duke was quiet for a moment. Then, "You risked everything for me." "Why?" "I'm a stranger to you. I never spoke to you, never acknowledged your existence. You could have let me die, and no one would have blamed you." Eliza thought of the stable boy, of her father's words, of all the years she had spent silent and safe and alone. "Because I couldn't stay silent anymore," she said finally. "Not after what I heard, not after what I knew. I couldn't watch another innocent person die because I was too afraid to speak." "Another?" She told him then, about the stable boy, about the guards who stole and blamed him, about the guilt that had haunted her for 3 years. The Duke listened without interrupting. When she finished, his expression had changed. The cold, distant nobleman was gone. In his place was a man who looked at her and truly saw her. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for that boy, and for you. It wasn't your fault. It was my manner, my guards, my failure to see what was happening under my own roof." He paused, "including my own brother's betrayal." "He fooled everyone," Eliza said gently. "He was very good at pretending." "He was." The Duke's jaw tightened. "And now I need to stop him before he consolidates power and makes himself untouchable." "How?" "You're supposed to be dead. He'll be claiming the title as we speak." "Then we'll have to give him exactly what he wants," the Duke said, his voice growing stronger. "Let him think he's won. Let him claim the title gather the nobles, make his grand announcement." Eliza understood. "And then you return from the dead and expose him for what he is." The Duke looked at her. "But I can't do it alone. I need someone I can trust, someone who has already proven their loyalty beyond question. You don't even know me. I know you saved my life when you had every reason not to. I know you risked everything to warn me, even when no one would listen. I know you're braver than most knights I've fought beside." He extended his hand. "Will you help me, Eliza Moore?" She looked at his hand, scarred from battle, trembling slightly from poison, offered to her in partnership rather than command. For 6 years, she had been invisible. Now she was being asked to stand in the light. Eliza took his hand. "I'll help you," she said. "We'll stop him together." And in that moment, in that abandoned infirmary with dawn breaking through broken shutters, something shifted between them. Trust. The kind of trust that comes not from blood or duty, but from survival and choice. The kind of trust that, in time, might become something more. The announcement came at noon. Throughout Ravenscroft Manor, bells tolled in mourning. Servants wept. Nobles gathered in hushed clusters, their faces painted with shock and grief. Lord Edmund Ravenscroft stood in the great hall, his expression perfectly composed in sorrow, and delivered the news that would change everything. Duke Alastair Ravenscroft was dead. From their hiding place in the abandoned infirmary, Eliza and the Duke listened to the distant bells, each toll a proclamation of Edmund's lie. "He's moving faster than I expected," the Duke said quietly. He was stronger now, able to sit up without assistance, though his face still carried the pallor of recent poison. "I thought he'd wait at least a day to make it seem more believable." "He's afraid," Eliza said, adjusting the bandage on his wrist, where she'd been monitoring his pulse. "He knows I escaped. He knows I might talk. He needs to solidify his position before anyone starts asking questions." "Smart." The Duke's voice held grudging respect for his brother's cunning even now. "If he controls the narrative, controls the guards, controls who speaks and who doesn't, then by the time anyone doubts him, it's too late to matter." They had spent the past day planning, talking, sharing information that neither had possessed before. The Duke told her about Edmund's growing resentment over the years, the small comments he'd dismissed, the moments of tension he'd attributed to stress. Eliza told him about the servants' gossip, the financial irregularities she'd noticed, the guards who had suddenly received unexplained promotions. Together, they assembled a picture of conspiracy that went deeper than either had imagined. "He's been planning this for at least 2 years, the Duke said grimly. "Maybe longer. This wasn't impulse. This was strategy." "Which means he'll have thought through contingencies," Eliza added. "If you simply appear and accuse him, he'll have a story ready. Witnesses bought, evidence planted. He might even claim you're an imposter trying to steal the title. Then we need more than my word against his." The Duke stood carefully, testing his strength. He was recovering quickly. Another day, and he'd be close to full capacity. "We need proof, documentation, something undeniable." "The poison," Eliza said suddenly. "The apothecary who made it. If we can find him, get him to testify. Edmund will have already killed him or sent him far away. No loose ends." The Duke paced slowly, thinking. "But he can't erase everything. There must be financial records, payments to guards, correspondence, something he missed. Where would he keep such things? His private study. He's always been meticulous with records. It's one of the qualities I valued in him." The Duke's mouth twisted bitterly. "It never occurred to me he might be documenting his own treachery. Can we get to his study? Not without being seen, and if Edmund knows I'm alive, he'll destroy everything immediately." The Duke turned to her. "Which is why he needs to keep believing I'm dead, at least until the right moment." "What moment?" "The will reading." The Duke's eyes glinted with cold calculation. "By law, My will must be read publicly within 3 days of my death, before the full council and any nobility present at the estate. Edmund will want to make a spectacle of it, proof of his legitimate inheritance, his rightful claim to the title. He'll gather everyone together. Exactly. Every noble, every council member, every witness he needs to legitimize his position. The Duke smiled without humor. And that's when I'll return from the dead and tear his lies apart in front of everyone. Eliza felt a chill run through her. It's dangerous. If something goes wrong, then I die for real, and Edmund wins. The Duke met her eyes. But doing nothing means he's already won. At least this way, we fight back. We, Eliza repeated softly. You saved my life, Eliza Moore. That makes you part of this, whether you want to be or not. His expression softened slightly. Though I would understand if you wanted to walk away. You've done more than anyone could ask. I can give you money, passage to another, county, a new identity. No. The word came out harder than she'd intended. I didn't save you just to run away. I'm seeing this through. It could get you killed. I was already risking that when I knocked the wine from your hand. Eliza stood, meeting his gaze squarely. Besides, you need me. You don't know the servants' passages, the guard rotations, the people who might still be loyal. You've been powerful for so long that you forgot what it's like to be invisible. And you've been invisible for so long that you forgot what it's like to be seen, the Duke countered. Then more gently, why are you really doing this? And don't tell me it's just about the stable boy. That's part of it, but not all of it. Eliza was quiet for a long moment, considering her answer. The truth was complicated. It was about the stable boy, yes, about her father's teachings, about 6 years of silence and invisibility and swallowing her voice. But it was also about something she'd only recently begun to understand. I'm tired of being powerless, she said finally. I'm tired of watching the world happen around me while I clean up after it. I'm tired of knowing things and having no voice to speak them. You gave me a choice. Not because you had to, but because you actually listened. That's more respect than I've gotten in 6 years of service. Then we're agreed, the Duke said. We work together, partners, not master and servant. Partners, Eliza echoed, and something warm unfurled in her chest. Over the next 2 days, they planned in careful detail. They identified who could be trusted, a handful of guards who'd served the Duke's father, a few older servants who'd known Edmund before his mask had perfected. They plotted entrances, exits, escape routes if things went wrong. And they talked. Not about strategy or betrayal, but about life, about the things they'd seen and done, about fears and dreams and the people they'd been before this moment. The Duke told her about the weight of inheriting power at 16, about battles won and friends lost, about the loneliness of command. Eliza told her about her father, about learning to read by candlelight, about the small rebellions of an invisible life. In that abandoned infirmary, with death and danger waiting beyond the walls, 2 people who had lived in the same manner for 6 years finally met each other, and something grew between them that neither had expected. Not just trust, not just respect, something that felt dangerously like connection. On the 3rd day, Edmund made his announcement. The will would be read at sunset in the Great Hall. All nobles were required to attend. The entire staff would bear witness to the official transfer of power. It's time, the Duke said, tightening the cloak Eliza had stolen from the old storage rooms. Beneath it, he wore simple servant's clothing, the disguise that would allow him to move through the manor unseen until the moment of revelation. Are you ready? Eliza asked. He looked at her, this woman who had saved his life, who had chosen to stand beside him when she had every reason to run, who had somehow become the most important person in his world in the span of 3 days. With you? Yes. Eliza felt her breath catch. There was something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something that looked almost like, no, not now, not yet. They had a traitor to expose. But later, after this was over, after Edmund was dealt with and the truth was revealed, later, there might be time for what was growing between them. Then let's go kill your brother's lies, Eliza said. The Duke smiled, a real smile, the first she'd seen from him. Let's show him what happens when you underestimate invisible people. Together they left the infirmary and moved toward the great hall, toward justice, toward revelation, toward a confrontation that would determine not just who ruled Ravenscroft Manor, but what kind of future they would build together, if they survived the next hour. The great hall of Ravenscroft Manor had never held so many people. Every noble within riding distance had arrived for the spectacle. Council members sat in their ceremonial robes. Merchants who had done business with the estate stood in careful clusters. Servants lined the walls, witnessing history in the making. And at the center of it all stood Lord Edmund Ravenscroft, dressed in mourning black, his face a perfect mask of grief. Eliza watched from the servant's entrance, hidden in the shadows, with the Duke beside her. He had pulled his hood low, his posture deliberately hunched to appear like just another servant. No one looked at them. No one ever looked at servants during important moments. "He's good," the Duke murmured, watching his brother. "I almost believe he's mourning me." "He probably is," Eliza whispered back. "In his own way. He loved you and hated you at the same time. That's what makes him dangerous." Edmund raised his hands and the hall fell silent. "My friends, my honored guests, my family in grief." His voice was thick with emotion, carefully modulated to reach every corner of the hall. "We gather today to honor the memory of my brother, Duke Alastair Ravenscroft. A man of honor, a man of strength, a man who gave everything to protect this estate and everyone within it." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Several women dabbed at their eyes with handkerchiefs. "His death came suddenly, tragically," Edmund continued. "A heart ailment," the physician said. The strain of his recent campaign, combined with exhaustion and stress, proved too much for even his formidable constitution. "Lies," the Duke breathed. "Every word." "We're about to fix that," Eliza said quietly. Edmund gestured to the Duke's personal solicitor, a thin man named Whitmore, who had served the family for 30 years. "Master Whitmore will now read my brother's last will and testament. Though it pains me deeply, we must observe the law and ensure Alastair's final wishes are honored." Whitmore stepped forward, unrolling a parchment with shaking hands. The old solicitor looked uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something or someone. "The last will and testament of Duke Alastair Ravenscroft," Whitmore began, his voice wavering. "Written this past spring, witnessed and sealed in accordance with the law." Eliza noticed something. Whitmore's hands weren't just shaking. They were trembling with what looked like barely contained rage. His jaw was tight, his eyes hard. He knew. Somehow the old solicitor knew something was wrong. "To my brother Edmund," Whitmore read, his voice gaining strength. "I leave my affection, my gratitude, and the responsibility of stewardship should I die without an heir of my own blood." Edmund bowed his head, the picture of humble acceptance. "The title of Duke, the estate of Ravenscroft, and all associated holdings shall pass to Lord Edmund Ravenscroft, with the understanding that he will govern with wisdom, justice, and honor." The nobles nodded approvingly. This was expected, proper, the natural order of succession. Edmund looked up, his eyes sweeping the crowd with carefully restrained triumph. "I accept this burden with a heavy heart," he said solemnly. "I will endeavor to honor my brother's memory by ruling with the same strength and conviction he—" "That won't be necessary," The voice cut through the hall like a blade. Every head turned. The Duke threw back his hood and stepped into the light. The hall erupted. Gasps, shouts. Several people screamed. One elderly noblewoman fainted and had to be caught by her servants. The guards reached for their weapons, uncertain whether they were witnessing a miracle or a ghost. But Edmund's reaction was the most telling. For just 1 second, one unguarded, perfect second, his mask shattered completely. Pure, undiluted fury blazed across his face. Not shock, not joy at his brother's survival, rage at his plan's failure. Then the mask snapped back into place, replaced by carefully constructed amazement. "Alistair, brother, you're alive?" "Very much alive," the Duke said, his voice carrying easily through the chaos, thanks to someone who cared more about truth than their own safety. He gestured, and Eliza stepped forward. She felt every eye in the hall lock onto her. After 6 years of invisibility, the weight of being seen was almost crushing, but she kept her head high, her steps steady. She was done hiding. "Many of you don't know this woman," the Duke continued. "Her name is Eliza Moore. She is a maid in this manor, and 3 nights ago, she saved my life." Edmund found his voice. "Brother, I don't understand. We were told you died of heart failure. The physicians confirmed." "The physicians confirmed that I drank poison," the Duke interrupted coldly. "Poison that was placed in my wine during our private supper. Poison that would have killed me if Eliza hadn't intervened." The hall exploded again. This time the shouts were different, angry, confused, demanding answers. "That's impossible," Edmund said, and his performance was flawless. "Who would dare?" "You would." The Duke's voice cracked like thunder. "You dared, Edmund. You planned it. You arranged it, and you very nearly succeeded." Edmund's face paled, or appeared to pale. Even now, Eliza couldn't tell what was real and what was acting. "How can you accuse me of such a thing? I'm your brother." "You were my brother." The Duke moved closer, and Eliza saw several guards shifting nervously, unsure who to protect. "You were the person I trusted more than anyone in the world, and you repaid that trust by trying to murder me." "This is madness." Edmund turned to the crowd, spreading his hands in supplication. "My brother survives a terrible accident and returns accusing me of conspiracy. He's clearly still affected by whatever illness struck him." "I overheard you planning it." Eliza's voice rang clear through the hall. 2 nights before the attempt, you were in the Duke's private meeting room, discussing the poison, the timing, how you would stage it as an accident. Edmund turned his gaze on her, and for just a moment, she saw the hatred underneath. "And we're supposed to believe the word of a servant? A girl who probably hoped to gain favor by inventing wild tales." "She's not inventing anything," Whitmore spoke up suddenly. The old solicitor stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "I've served this family for 3 decades. I've known both of you since you were boys, and I've watched Lord Edmund for the past 6 months." Edmund's eyes widened fractionally. "Whitmore, you asked me to alter the will 3 times, Whitmore said, his voice shaking with fury. "Small changes, subtle adjustments that would make the transition of power smoother, you said. I refused each time because something felt wrong. And then the Duke suddenly dies, and you move to claim power within hours?" "That's circumstantial. The wine goblet still exists," the Duke said quietly. "The one Eliza knocked from my hand. The one that hissed and smoked when it hit the stone floor. I had loyal servants retrieve it before Edmund could destroy the evidence. Would you like us to test it publicly, brother? Would you like to explain why wine from our private supper can eat through stone?" Edmund's mask flickered again. His eyes darted to the exits, calculating distances, assessing escape routes. "And there's more," the Duke continued relentlessly. "The guards who were mysteriously reassigned the night of the attempt. The sudden payments to men with no clear service record. The meeting with an unknown apothecary 3 weeks ago that you failed to mention in any official capacity. I have records, Whitmore added. Financial irregularities going back months. I documented everything because I suspected treachery. I just didn't know from whom. The nobles were murmuring now, their expressions shifting from confusion to horror to anger. The guards who had been loyal to Edmund suddenly looked uncertain, stepping away from him, hands moving toward weapons, but unclear who to point them at. Edmund looked around the hall, at the faces turning against him, at the evidence mounting, at the escape routes being blocked by guards who no longer knew which brother to obey. His shoulders sagged, the mask finally completely shattered. You want to know the truth? Edmund's voice was no longer charming or warm. It was cold, bitter, filled with years of resentment. Fine. Here's the truth. I should have been Duke. I was smarter, better with people, more diplomatic. But Father looked at me and saw nothing. Just the spare son, the backup plan. And you? He turned to Alistair, his face twisted with hate. You got everything, not because you earned it, not because you deserved it, but because you were born first. So you tried to kill me. I tried to take what should have been mine from the beginning. Edmund's voice rose to a shout. I spent my entire life in your shadow, playing the loyal brother, the trusted advisor, watching you squander opportunities I could have used brilliantly. And everyone loved me for it. Poor Edmund, so devoted to his brother, so selfless, so kind. He laughed, and it was a horrible sound. I hated every second of it, every smile, every bow, every time I called you Your Grace when it should have been my title. He looked at Eliza, his eyes burning, and I would have succeeded if not for some invisible maid who couldn't mind her own business. Seize him, the Duke commanded quietly. The guards moved immediately this time. Edmund didn't resist as they took his arms, as they removed the ceremonial dagger from his belt, as they led him toward the doors. But as he passed his brother, he stopped and met Alistair's eyes. I loved you, Edmund said softly. That's the worst part. I loved you and hated you in equal measure, and I don't know which feeling was stronger. I loved you too, the Duke replied, his voice heavy with grief. I still do. That's why this hurts. Edmund smiled sadly. Then we're both fools. The guards led him away. The hall remained silent until he was gone. Then, slowly, the nobles began to move, to whisper, to process what they'd witnessed. The Duke turned to face them all. The conspiracy is ended, he said firmly. Justice will be served. And Ravenscroft Manor will continue under lawful leadership. He paused. But I think we've all learned something today about the dangers of blind trust, even in those we call family. His eyes found Eliza's across the hall. And the value of trusting those who prove themselves through actions rather than blood. The crowd dispersed slowly, still murmuring, still shocked. But order was restored. The rightful Duke lived. The traitor was caught. And in the chaos, very few people noticed when the Duke crossed the hall to stand beside a plain servant girl, or the way he looked at her like she was the most important person in the world. The scandal broke like a storm. Within hours of Edmund's arrest, the story spread through the county like wildfire. A duke betrayed by his own brother, a murder plot foiled by a servant, a dramatic return from the dead. It had everything: betrayal, poison, hidden passages, and justice served. The nobility couldn't stop talking about it. But that scandal was nothing compared to what came 3 weeks later. Eliza stood in the small chamber that had been given to her after the confrontation, no longer servants' quarters, but a proper guest room with windows, furniture, and space to breathe. She stared at the dress laid out on the bed. It was beautiful, emerald green silk with delicate embroidery, fitted but not ostentatious, elegant without being showy. the kind of dress a noblewoman might wear to a formal dinner, or to meet with the Duke. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Eliza called. Mrs. Thornberry entered, her expression carefully neutral. The head housekeeper had been walking on eggshells around Eliza ever since the revelation, guilt written clearly on her face for dismissing Eliza's warning so completely. "The Duke has requested your presence in his private study," Mrs. Thornberry said formally. "Whenever you're ready." "Thank you." Mrs. Thornberry hesitated at the door. "Miss Moore." "Eliza, I owe you an apology. What I said before, the way I dismissed you." "You believed what everyone believes," Eliza said quietly. "That power and status determine truth. You weren't wrong to think that way. The whole world works that way." "But you proved it doesn't have to." Eliza smiled slightly. "I got lucky, and I had nothing left to lose." After Mrs. Thornberry left, Eliza dressed carefully. The silk felt strange against her skin after years of rough wool. The mirror showed someone she barely recognized, a woman who looked like she belonged in this world of nobility and power. But she didn't belong, not really, and that was what scared her most about this meeting. The Duke's study was exactly as she remembered it: dark wood, leather, maps, and documents. But now she entered through the main door instead of sneaking in to clean. Now the Duke stood as she entered, as if she were an equal rather than a servant. "Eliza, thank you for coming." "You're the Duke. I couldn't exactly refuse." "You could," he said seriously. "You've earned the right to refuse anything, including this conversation." She studied him. He looked better, fully recovered from the poison, the color back in his face, the strength returned to his bearing. But there was something different about him, too, something in the way he looked at people now, as if he'd learned to actually see them. "What did you want to talk about?" Eliza asked, though she suspected she already knew. The Duke gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." When they were both seated, he leaned forward, his expression intense. "Edmund has been sentenced," he said. "Life imprisonment in the northern fortress. No execution. I couldn't bring myself to kill my own brother, even after everything. He'll live, but he'll never hold power again. That's merciful. Perhaps too merciful. The council wanted his head." The Duke's jaw tightened. "But mercy isn't why I asked you here. I have a proposal for you, Eliza. Several, actually." He stood and moved to his desk, returning with the small leather purse. "First, this. 10,000 gold crowns. Enough to buy property, start a business, live comfortably for the rest of your life. It's yours, regardless of what else you decide." Eliza stared at the purse. 10,000 crowns. More money than she'd earn in 50 lifetimes of service. "Second," the Duke continued, "I can arrange passage to any county you choose. A new identity, letters of introduction, everything you need to start fresh somewhere. No one knows your past. You could be anyone you want to be." "Why would I need a new identity?" "Because staying here will be complicated." The Duke's expression grew troubled. "You saved my life. You exposed a conspiracy. You're a hero in the eyes of the common people. But to the nobility, you're a servant who stepped above her station, who dared to speak when she should have stayed silent, who disrupted the natural order. They hate me. Some do. Others are simply uncomfortable. You remind them that power isn't absolute, that servants can change the course of history, that the world they've built on class and hierarchy isn't as stable as they believed." He paused. "Staying here means facing that discomfort every day. It means being stared at, whispered about, judged constantly. That's why I'm offering you the option to leave, with enough money to build a new life somewhere else." Eliza looked at the purse. Freedom, escape, a chance to disappear again, but this time on her own terms, with resources and possibilities. It was everything she should want. "What's the third option?" she asked quietly. The Duke took a deep breath. Stay. Not as a servant, not as a guest, but as... He hesitated, choosing his words with obvious care. As someone important to me, as someone I trust above anyone else, as someone I want beside me. Eliza's heart hammered. What are you saying? I'm saying that over the past 3 weeks I've thought about nothing but you. The Duke's voice was steady, but his eyes were vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. I'm saying that the person who saved my life is the same person who taught me to see again, who reminded me that loyalty isn't about blood or duty. It's about choice and action and courage. Your Grace, Alistair, he interrupted. Please, when it's just us, call me Alistair. Alistair, she tried, and the name felt strange and intimate on her tongue. What exactly are you proposing? He met her eyes directly. Eventually, if you'll have me, marriage. But I know that's asking too much too soon. You've just escaped one impossible situation. I won't trap you in another. So for now, I'm asking if you'll stay, as my advisor, my confidant, the person I turn to when I need honest counsel. We'll let society adjust to your presence. Give them time to accept what you've become. And what have I become? Powerful, he said simply, in the ways that matter most. You have influence now, whether you want it or not. The question is whether you'll use it. Eliza stood and walked to the window. Outside, the estate stretched in all directions, gardens, fields, forests. She had cleaned these windows 100 times, always looking out at a world she could never touch. Now that world was being offered to her. They'll never accept me, she said quietly. The nobles, the council, even if I stay, even if we eventually marry, I'll always be the servant girl who got above herself. They'll despise me for it. Probably, Alistair agreed, coming to stand beside her. Most of them will, but some won't. And more importantly, the people will love you. The servants, the merchants, the common folk. They already see you as one of their own, who prove that courage matters more than birth. That's a lot of pressure. It is, which is why I'm giving you the choice. He turned to face her fully. Take the money and leave. Build a new life somewhere else. I'll understand, and I'll be grateful forever that you saved me. Or stay, and we'll figure this out together. We'll face the judgment, weather the scandal, and build something new. Something new, Eliza repeated softly. A partnership where blood doesn't matter more than character. Where loyalty is chosen, not inherited. Where the person beside the Duke is there because of who they are, not what they were born into. He smiled slightly. It probably sounds naive, but you made me believe it's possible. Eliza thought about the options laid before her. Safety versus struggle. Escape versus confrontation. The easy path versus the meaningful one. She thought about her father, who had taught her to think and question and refused to accept the world as it was. She thought about the stable boy, whose death had taught her that silence was its own form of violence. She thought about the past 3 weeks, the way Alistair had looked at her not as a servant but as a person, the conversations that stretched late into the night, the moments when their hands had brushed and neither had pulled away. And she thought about the future, not the safe, anonymous future of escape, but the difficult, uncertain future of staying and fighting and building something that mattered. I'll stay, she said. Alistair's expression transformed with relief and something deeper, something that looked like hope. You're certain? No, Eliza admitted. I'm terrified. But I spent 6 years being certain and safe and invisible. I think it's time to try being brave. Instead, he smiled, that genuine smile she'd first seen in the infirmary, the one that transformed his entire face. Then we'll be brave together. There's one condition, Eliza said. Name it. When we marry, It's not because you feel obligated, not because you owe me, not because of gratitude or guilt, or any other reason except that you actually want to. Eliza, I mean it. She met his eyes steadily. I won't be your noble sacrifice. I won't be the reward you give yourself for surviving. If we do this, it's because we choose each other. Actually choose. Not just because circumstances threw us together. Alistair reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he took her hand. Then let me be clear, he said quietly. I choose you, not out of obligation, not out of gratitude. I choose you because over the past 3 weeks, you've become the most important person in my world. Because when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you in it. Because you make me want to be better than I was. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. That's a good start. He laughed softly. Just a start? We have time, she said. Time to be sure. Time to let it grow into something real instead of something desperate and strange. Time, Alistair agreed. Though I should warn you, the council wants to throw a celebration, a public ceremony honoring the woman who saved the Duke. They're calling you the Guardian of Ravenscroft. Eliza groaned. That's terrible. I know, but you're going to have to get used to it. His expression grew more serious. Are you ready for what comes next? The attention, the judgment, the constant scrutiny? No, Eliza said honestly, but I don't think anyone can be ready for something like this. I'll just have to figure it out as I go. Then we'll figure it out together. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn morning, Duke Alistair Ravenscroft married Eliza Moore in the chapel of Ravenscroft Manor. Half the nobility refused to attend. They called it a scandal, a mockery, a betrayal of proper society. Letters poured in from distant counties expressing shock and disapproval. But the chapel was full anyway, packed with servants who wept with joy, with merchants who'd heard the story and traveled to witness history, with common folk who saw in Eliza's rise a promise that the world could change, and with a few nobles, the wise ones, the ones who understood that power based on accident of birth was always fragile, who came to support a duke who chose courage over convention. As Eliza walked down the aisle in a dress of midnight blue, she saw all of it, the disapproval, the judgment, the love, the hope. And at the end of the aisle, she saw Alistair, waiting for her, choosing her, not because he had to, because he wanted to. When they spoke their vows, Alistair added something not in the traditional ceremony. I promise to see you, he said quietly, always. Not as what you were, but as who you are, not as a servant or a duchess, but as Eliza, the woman who saved my life by refusing to stay silent, the woman who taught me that loyalty is a choice, not an obligation, the woman I choose today and every day after. Eliza's vows were simpler. I promise to stay visible, she said, to speak when others would prefer my silence, to stand beside you, not in your shadow, but in the light, and to remind you, whenever you need it, that we build the world we want to live in, one brave choice at a time. They sealed their vows with a kiss that sent the chapel into applause, scandalously enthusiastic from the servants, politely restrained from the few nobles present. As they walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, Eliza caught sight of Mrs. Thornbury in the crowd. The old housekeeper was crying openly, her face transformed with genuine joy. Their eyes met. Mrs. Thornbury mouthed 2 words. Thank you. Eliza nodded, because she understood. This wedding wasn't just about her and Alistair. It was about every servant who'd been invisible, every person who'd been told their voice didn't matter. Every soul who'd chosen courage when silence would have been safer. It was proof that the world could change, one person at a time, one brave choice at a time. That night, as the celebrations wound down and the guests departed, Alistair and Eliza stood on the balcony overlooking the estate. "Do you regret it?" Alistair asked quietly. "Staying, choosing this complicated life?" Eliza leaned against him, feeling his arm come around her shoulders. "Ask me in 20 years, she said with a smile. "I will," he promised. "And 20 years after that, and 20 after that." "That's a lot of asking. I have a lot of time to make up for. 6 years of not seeing you. I plan to spend the rest of my life making sure you're never invisible again." Eliza turned in his arms, looking up at him. This man who had been a stranger, then a burden, then a partner, and now something infinitely more precious. "Then I suppose I'll have to get used to being seen," she said. "I suppose you will," Alistair agreed. And there, under the stars, with the manor glowing behind them and the future stretching unknown before them, the Duke and his Duchess began their life together. Not because of blood, not because of duty, but because of the simplest, strongest bond of all, the choice to stand beside someone and say, "I see you, I choose you, and I will keep choosing you every single day." It was, Eliza thought, a pretty good foundation for a marriage, and for a revolution.